Hey everyone, we're just going to give it a few more minutes to let people join, so stay tuned and we'll kick right off. Hey, thanks for joining so far. Just going to give it a few more minutes, but just wanted to say hi. If you've got any early questions, drop them in the chat and we'll respond. We've thought about doing some different formats for this. We've thought about maybe doing Zoom as well so people can do two-way interaction and talk. I think this is the easiest way to do it, but if you just put some comments in the chat, let me know and we'll get to them. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about a few things tonight. Some of you might know me already just from being up here in the mountains, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about what a county supervisor actually does, what my professional qualifications are, because I think most of you probably know me from snow experience and maybe not too much else. So I'm gonna talk about why I'd actually do a good job as a county supervisor, and then talk about some of my both local and county-wide priorities. A big part of this for me is really getting granular as it relates to the geographies in District 3. Obviously, we're up here in the mountains, and the mountains are especially close to my heart. But District 3 is huge, and it's got cities. It's got Redlands, Highland, Yucaipa down the mountain. It goes up to Barstow, and then all the way to the border. So we've got cities, mountains, and deserts. It's a really tough place to manage because it's got such different groups of people and such different geographies. But I'm up for the challenge, and I think we can do it better than we have been so far. So that's the meat of what I'm going to cover tonight. We're going to have maybe a midway break for Q&A and then some Q&A at the end. So if you have questions as we're going through, drop them in the chat, and then we'll get to everything either halfway through the presentation or right at the end. Just waiting for my my operator here to tell me when we're ready to kick off and go. All right, we on the presentation here? Okay, we're gonna give one more minute. Okay. Okay, let's just kick off and go. So, good evening, mountain friends and allies. I think it's probably time we bring that back. It's been a little while since the snowstorms last year. If you don't know me already, I'm Graham Smith. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors for San Bernardino County here in District 3. I was talking about at the beginning, it's a big district, it's a big job, but I'm really up for it. And one of the things I wanted to do is explain to you what some of my experience is and why I think I do a really great job as supervisor. So to kick that process off, I think it's worth talking about what a county supervisor actually does. I like to think of this in four different things. It's approving the budget, allocating resources, approving legislation, and securing investment. So quickly going through each one of these. One, this county has a pretty big budget. Our economy here is about $110 billion, and we've got a $10 billion annual budget for our county. The county supervisor needs to be financially literate. The county is made up of dozens of individual departments. As residents, you've probably interfaced directly with some of those, whether it's building and safety, to pull a permit to build a house or open a business. And then there are some that you probably have never even heard of. Like there's a Geographic Information Services division in the county. Because there are so many, the job is really to oversee and supervise, and you don't need specialist knowledge in each one. Approving legislation. A lot of the county supervisor's role is interpreting and executing legislation that comes from either the federal government or the state of California. And because a lot of this job is interpreting stuff that comes down from the state, what's really important is being able to work through that legislation quickly and figuring out the best way to implement it for all residents. And that is not an easy job in San Bernardino County because it's so big and it's so diverse. And lastly, we need to be able to secure investment. We'll talk about this later in the presentation, but the single biggest source of revenue for San Bernardino County is reimbursements from the state and the federal government. And also, I think an effective supervisor needs to be able to go out, promote San Bernardino to private industry, and secure investment from private companies to come and do business here. And this is something I think we could be doing a lot better. So here's a bit of background on my professional experience and why I think I'm particularly well suited to this actual role. So I think of my career in kind of two phases, a big finance corporate career and then a small business career as well. So most of my professional experience is in corporate finance. And I worked for two pretty big companies, not necessarily household names. My first job out of school was a company called Lehman Brothers. You might remember that as the investment bank that famously went bust in 2008. I was young at the time and I left before it all came crashing down, but I spent directly correlated to the work of a county supervisor. So my job in my investing career was I had to go out and raise money from investors, put that into a company fund, and then figure out how to allocate that money across a bunch of different companies to make them all operate better, to create jobs, and to make money for everyone. I was what was called a generalist, which means I looked at a bunch of different sectors. And at this point in my career, I've invested money in 40, 50 different sectors. So as I look at that county set of departments, the experience I have investing money in these businesses kind of correlates to the experience of a county supervisor supervising all these various departments. And then the next phase of my career, I decided I didn't want to do corporate work my entire life. So I left that job 5-6 years ago. And I've spent the rest of the time founding and running two small businesses. So I ran an online health and fitness app, and then I started a topical skincare brand. And through those experiences, I realized just how hard it is to be a small business owner, and particularly how hard it can be to be a small business owner here in San Bernardino County. And if you own a small business up here or you know people who do, I think we can all share a lot of the same frustrations. But that experience has really led to part of my desire to run for this job, because I think there's a big opportunity to make San Bernardino a much more small business friendly environment. And I think we would all stand to benefit in terms of our day-to-day community. So looking at that experience and going back to the role of a supervisor, I want to talk a bit about why the experience I have I think is pretty relevant. So huge part of the county supervisor's role is setting and approving the budget for the county. From my perspective, I think the current board we have doesn't have enough experience in this area. They rely completely on the county CEO to get this done. If you've kept up with the county headlines, our former county chief executive officer was ostensibly fired, I don't know, 6 months ago. He completely ran amok of the county, bullied people, wasted money, returned almost $5 million of homeless funding to the federal government. So unless you have a supervisor who actually knows how to look at the financials and supervise, it's easy for this stuff to happen. So I have been dealing with budgets on this scale my entire corporate career, and dealing with a $10 billion annual budget is something I know how to do. Allocating resources, this is kind of like investing that company fund of money into different companies. A huge part of this job is taking the county's resources, figuring out what departments need help, and figuring out what makes those departments work and what they need to make them better. This is exactly something I did in my corporate career. It wasn't just investing money day one. I sat on company boards, I work with them to figure out how to make life better, and this is exactly what I intend to do with the departments within the county. Approving legislation. I talked before about how this is a fast-paced environment. If I could think about one core skill set I picked up from my finance career, it's doing things, learning things quickly and responding in real time. This is also something I've tried to prove to you guys that I've been doing throughout this campaign. I like to talk about the county's short-term rental report as a for instance here. If you don't know, the county released an STR report basically outlining why they think STRs haven't had an impact on the availability of long-term rental housing. Within a matter of days, I had read through that report. I provided a full opinion on it. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a YouTube video on it, so go check it out after this. So what I've been trying to do is give you a preview of how I will behave if elected to this position and demonstrate to you the fact that I can do this stuff in real time. And in fact, I think a lot faster than some of the supervisors we have right now. And lastly, securing investment. This is a huge part of my prior experience. I think we need to do a better job as San Bernardino County marketing ourselves to the state of California. We need to do a better job of making business friendlier here because we need to bring money into this county. I'm going to talk later about how I think our county is way too focused on one or two industries and our Board of Supervisors has not done a great job of promoting outside business. So let's talk local. We're in the mountains. The mountains are obviously, I mean, I have a lifelong connection to all of San Bernardino County, or especially all of District 3, but the mountains are, of course, near and dear to my heart because I'm talking to you from my living room here in Sky Forest. And there's way more on my list than just these 4 things, but I want to put these 4 in to get the conversation started. And if there's more you want to talk about, put it in the chat and we'll talk about it in a bit. Short-term rentals have become a real hot-button topic, not just in our mountain communities, but also in the desert. If you've watched my video on STRs, what I've said is I think STRs are a necessary fact of a tourist-driven economy. We need people to come stay here, keep our businesses open, keep people coming to our economy. But we need to make sure we do it in a reasonable and responsible way. So I am in favor of some kind of cap on STRs. I don't know exactly what the level should be yet, but the biggest thing that I feel we need to do with our STR community here is make sure that the revenue the county generates from STRs stays in our local community. Right now, all the STR revenue goes in the county's general fund. There's absolutely no requirement that it's spent on infrastructure up here in the mountain. And I think we all know we need some improvements here. The county's been doing some work on the roads, but it's not enough. We need more road maintenance. We need more people dedicated to code enforcement for problem STR properties. So there's no shortage of uses of that funding, and I feel really strongly it should stay here. I also want to say that one thing I've noticed with STRs is I think the main problem STR properties are the ones that aren't owned by people up here in the mountain. So if you're a mountain resident and you're watching this and you own an STR, this is really not geared toward you. I think all of our mountain friends and residents who also own rental properties are some of the most responsible rental owners out there. Disaster prep. This is obviously near and dear to my heart. This is a huge part of the reason that I decided to run for this seat. I got really involved last winter over the snowstorms, and I think there are opportunities that we need to take advantage of to make sure we're more prepared next time. So there's a whole lot we can be talking about here, but just a couple things to kick us off. One is just prioritizing life over commerce. I think a big part of the reason we wound up in such a bad position 9 months ago is the county focused a lot of resource on keeping commerce open, like the 15 corridor, rather than having plows up here. I also want to make sure that we're coordinating with external agencies. One, I'm trying not to throw anyone under the bus in this election and in this run, but one thing I've noticed from our county leadership is they're very quick to pass off the buck and pass the blame if something didn't happen and it wasn't a county department. So I've heard a lot of, oh, well, that's the state of California or that's Caltrans, and I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but I think we're all better off if we work together to make sure people are taken care of. So bringing people together, hammering out deals and transactions and getting people from diverse places to work together, that was a core skill set of my last job, and that's something I want to bring here. Small business. As a fellow small business owner and as a mountain resident, I want to make small business easier up here. I think we all have way too many stories of county code inspectors driving up from down the mountain telling us no, saying, no, you can't open that business. There's a tavern that Richard and Patty Teachout have been trying to open in Sky Forest for almost 3 years. We've talked to them about all their trials and tribulations with building and safety. We've even heard of institutionalized nepotism in some of these county departments. I want to do my part to put an end to that, and I also want to find ways to make small business up here easier. I think particularly in a rural community, small business is one of the most important aspects of life, and we need more of it up here. It needs to be easier. So finding ways to make small business easier, not just up the mountain, but across this county, I think needs to be a big priority for us, because whenever I talk to small business owners in San Bernardino, in fact, I was just over meeting Bill Johnson of Sky Park, and he said, if I knew going into this how much of a problem it'd be with the county, I'd never do it again. And I think that's a problem. Last but not least, I think you all feel my pain here on being an unincorporated resident of San Bernardino County. We have if you're in Big Bear, you might have a slightly different view on this, but especially on our side of the mountain in the Crestline, Lake Arrowhead, Skyforest, Running Springs area, we're all unincorporated. We have no local city council that can help us out with building permits or decide where our snow plows go. We rely directly on the county for absolutely everything. Right now, the Board of Supervisors doesn't have a single member who lives in an unincorporated community, and I think it's time for that to change. One thing I talk about with people, not just in the mountains, but also in other unincorporated parts of the county like the desert, is even though I might not live in your specific unincorporated area, I know really well what the challenges are. And yours might be a little bit different, but in terms of being able to empathize with people on the challenges of being an unincorporated resident in this county, I know exactly what it feels like. So short of incorporating, and that's a discussion for another time, and it's not an easy one, and there's no clear-cut answer. Short of any of that, I think it's time we have a proper Board of Supervisor member who lives in an unincorporated part of the county, because let's not forget, unincorporated parts of San Bernardino make up by far the biggest part of the geography of this place. So we've talked a little bit about local, and it's actually, if you've visited to one of our in-person events before where we've had a table set up, one of the things we do is we have these little jars with issues where people can vote on what's important to them. And as you'd expect, people want to talk about the local issues that are important to them. I think it's also important we talk about some of the big picture issues in this county, because as I think about it, we are headed on a path that's going to set this county up for failure in the next 5 or 10 years if we don't start doing some stuff about it now. So here's a quick list of the things I want to address on a county-wide level if elected to this seat. One, I think we've all read the headlines here about the financial misconduct, the alleged corruption, and just the financial waste we have in this county. There were headlines earlier last year about the old county CEO, the guy who got fired, returning $4 million of homeless federal funding because it wasn't spent in time. There was a headline yesterday about the county being sued by the state of California for improper use of homeless funding. This has to stop. And I think one of the ways this can stop is with a supervisor member who has a proper financial background and knows how to see through the BS. 2, diversifying our economy. If you look over San Bernardino history, there have been long periods of boom and bust. And a big part of that reason is San Bernardino just can't get away from the idea of investing so heavily in one sector. So it's kind of like, I'm sure you've all heard that adage of don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is exactly what I'm seeing our county doing right now. So if you look over history, we've had problems here of military bases closing and the economy tanking, of rail yards closing and the economy tanking. What's happened recently is this current regime has invested so heavily in transport and logistics. It means it's now the biggest part of our economy, and the next time we have an issue here and that sector takes a dip, it's going to be a big problem for us overall. And I'll talk about this in a social media video, but I think there are really good reasons to expect that's going to happen. One, because this is a sector that's called a cyclical sector overall, which means it tracks the broader economy. So when the economy tanks, we're going to feel it extra hard here. The other reason is because this sector has almost 200,000 jobs across this county. These are all jobs that are first in line to get replaced with automated technology. And one thing I want us all to think about is what happens when 150,000 people are all of a sudden out of work. It means the subsistence payments the county has to make are going to go up. income tax revenue is going to go down, and we are all going to be feeling the pain of that. So we need to diversify. Third, I think our relationship as a county with the state of California and the federal government is kind of at an all-time low right now. And I say that because we've proposed cheap stunts like secession to try to get more funding, which, by the way, haven't worked because where is it? I also say that because of the thing I just talked about. The county is being sued by the state of California. We have not proven as a county that we can be trusted with the resources the state of California gives us. And that's a problem because reimbursements from the state and federal government are our single biggest source of funding as a county. So I think the way to get more money from the state of California is to focus on having a positive relationship, not a negative one. Lastly, I think we need to do some work in terms of restoring trust between the residents of this county and the government here. So I talked a little bit before about that whole not my problem attitude. I want to see that go away. As a county supervisor, one of the things I'm focused on is being incredibly transparent with you about what I think and how I vote on that board and why. And that's something I've tried to do this entire time on social media. My social media is not focused on me being out campaigning, getting endorsements, all this stuff that you see every other politician talk about. I'm talking about issues, I'm giving you my view, and I'm telling you what my agenda is. And if you agree with that agenda, then vote for me. If not, then don't. But at least I'm being upfront and honest with you about exactly what I think. And quite frankly, I think if we saw more of that in politics, we'd be in a much better position overall as a society. But that's a topic for another time. Also, more specifically here, I want to expand the network of municipal advisory committees we have around the district. We're actually in a pretty fortunate position in the mountains in that we have 2 of them up here. There's one in the Crestline area, one in the Lake Arrowhead area. But as you get around this whole district and talk to people in the desert, you'll find that MACs that used to be in the desert have since been disbanded, and people just feel like they don't have a voice. And that's a big problem when you have a county that's this big, this diverse, and you have such specific local issues. So a lot of you know me at least a little bit already, but I'll give you just a quick bit of my background in case you didn't know. I've had a lifelong connection to San Bernardino and in fact to this district. So the house that I'm in now, my grandparents built 50 years ago. I've been visiting this place my entire life, and I've lived here full time for the last 4 years or so. We also have what I like to call a family campsite down in Lucerne Valley I've been going to my entire life. So even though I've lived here full time for 4 years, I've had a lifelong connection to San Bernardino and in particular this very area. I grew up just outside of LA in a place called Topanga, if that makes any sense to you. It's another mountain area, so I am mountain bred through and through. And I haven't spent my whole life in California, and I actually think that's really important. For 12 years of my life, most of my professional corporate career was actually in London. And in that experience, I traveled to 50 countries, I traveled to all 7 continents, did business in 5 of them, and I really think I bring a breadth of life and work experience to this role that I'm confident you're not seeing in any other candidate. Yeah, I went to USC. I studied, super exciting, I know. I studied finance and accounting, but what that means is I have a head for numbers, and when I go through this budget, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And then just outside of that, I love to cook. If you're a friend watching this and you've been over for dinner, you know that's a big passion of mine. I like to tinker in my workshop. I'm just a normal guy. And that gets on to my reasons for running, which is I never expected to be doing this. It was never my life plan to be a politician. I am doing this because I genuinely feel like I've got a skill set that can be beneficial here, and I've seen some real areas where we need to improve for our neighborhood. And on that note, we realized directly how dysfunctional this county has been from the moment we moved here, whether that's basic stuff like picking up trash, improving your home, or some of the small business challenges I've talked about earlier. And I'm not even really going to talk about my snowstorm involvement because if you're up here, you probably know what I'm talking about. But that was the first time that I really properly considered ever running for office because one, I really enjoyed the experience of standing up for my community, and I think I did at least a little part in getting us all some better communication resources. And two, I realized through all of my communication with Don Rao, who I'm now running against, I actually have a skill set that can add some value here. Oh, there were some slides that were supposed to show up just on the district, but they didn't. I don't know if we took them out. It doesn't really matter. Just talking about how huge District 3 is, but you already know that. So just to sum up, and then we'll go over to Q&A. One, in terms of the finances, I'm the most qualified candidate here, and I think I'm the most qualified by a country mile. And I think that's really important when we get such a huge percentage of our budget from the state of California, and the state of California is in a $68 billion budget deficit right now. Getting money out of California is going to be harder than ever, and we need someone who knows how to lobby for investment to actually get the resources we deserve. My core skill set from my finance career isn't necessarily having detailed knowledge on every specific department that this county has. It's being able to learn things quickly, learn what makes those departments tick, and learn how to make them better. I feel very confidently that in the first few months of this job, I can get a really good feel on what makes all these dozens of departments work and what they need to make life better for all of us. I think, look, I want you're obviously doing your work evaluating who to vote for. I'm not the only candidate in this race. There are a few others. In terms of actually talking about the issues, in terms of giving you a firm opinion and giving you an opinion quickly, no one else is doing that. And again, I think if we had more people in politics doing that, we would be in a much better position. And lastly, I think I've got a broad base of empathy for people in District 3. I am an unincorporated mountain resident. I know what it's like to be stuck in my house for 2 weeks. I spend a lot of time in the desert. I know what it's like to be a desert resident. I know what it's like to be an unincorporated resident in this county when you think the county doesn't have your back. So if I think about what I think a good person in this role should be, it should be a combination of technical skills and knowing how to get the job done, and being able to empathize with the people that live in these many diverse places of this county. And that's something I think I can really deliver on. So with that, let's open it up to Q&A. I'm gonna look over at Mark, who's been running everything, and see if we've got any questions in the chat.
We had a question from the other day, which is about things like trash pickup and road maintenance. When the county's like, that's not my problem, like, how are you going to be different? Like, how are you going to be able to help when it's not something that you are directly responsible for?
Yeah, okay, so question is around when you have this attitude in the county of something not being my problem, and if I'm not a resident in a particular area, how can I do a better job of this? I think this comes down to a couple things. One is just bringing a different attitude and bringing a collaborative attitude and wanting to work with other county departments and other state departments to try to make life better for all of us. I also think this comes down to reestablishing and expanding the network of MAC committees we have across this county to make sure that we're getting real valuable input from residents in all these places and knowing what kind of local changes and local issues would make sense. No questions at all? I'm here, ask away.
Do you want to talk about maybe some specific ideas you have for how to make business easier? So we talked about deferring startup costs and changing the development code.
Yeah, so talking about small business and actual executable ideas, I think we can implement as a county for how to make small business easier. One, I think we need to have a cold hard look at the development code here. Because the county is so big, because District 3 is so diverse, I think a lot of you will know from being mountain residents, what works in the city doesn't necessarily work in the mountain, and that doesn't necessarily work in the desert. Now, talking to residents and talking to business owners, what we found is a lot of times the county will make exceptions, but they don't do so quickly, and it takes a lot of badgering, a lot of pestering to push through exactly what we need to get done. So one thing I want to do is look at ways that we can make some of those exceptions the rules so that we don't have to spend so much time having residents go down to the county building department and trying to pressure the county to get what they want. The other thing I'd like to evaluate doing is, I know this from my small business experience, if you've opened a small business, you know this as well. some of the upfront costs and fees that come associated with it are incredibly high. Whether that's franchise tax you have to pay to the state of California, permit fees you have from the county. One thing I'd really like to investigate doing is finding ways to defer, in particular, those year one startup fees when you're not making any revenue. Either defer or eliminate those on the basis that if we make San Bernardino a more small business friendly environment, we're gonna promote more people to wanna move here, open up businesses, grow their revenue, and then grow the county's tax base. As a general point, I'd much prefer to earn tax money on businesses that are growing rather than penalize them up front through permit fees.
Okay, we have some questions. Okay, question from Amy. What is your plan to hold the county accountable for corruption, and what outside allies can we access to bring more attention to the rampant corruption?
First thing is I think it's really, okay. Yeah, sorry, this is only our second session, so we're getting up to speed on the technology and whatnot here. The question is really around how to tackle what I really see as the institutionalized corruption in this county and how to work with other people to push forward that goal. First of all, I think it's really important that we have a person in one of these seats who is not part of the system, and that's a huge thing I think I bring to the table. I'm a political newcomer here, but I'm also no stranger to politics. So one thing I didn't talk about my professional experience was the fact that when I left my finance job, I was a senior person in the firm. To accomplish that in some of these places, you have to be really politically astute. So I do know how to play the game, and I will play it to push through my agenda. And that agenda is exactly what we've been talking about right here. So I think it's important we have a newcomer and we have a political outsider who doesn't have any entrenched relationships with the system. And I'm not gonna out him today, but we were talking with someone involved in the county at lunch today, and he was saying, from day one, I knew exactly what the old county CEO Leonard Hernandez was going to be. He was corrupt from the start, and that's exactly what turned out to be the case. I've been to a lot of Board of Supervisors meetings now, and what happens is they vote 5-0 on pretty much everything. There's absolutely no disagreement. So I think one thing that's important as you as a voter think about who to choose here is pick someone who's willing to stand up and stick their neck out and talk about what they think and why they think it. So one thing I've tried to demonstrate to you throughout this whole process is I'm willing to be that person. I'm willing to be the one person on the board who votes yes or no against the other four. And the other thing that I want to do is be really open and honest with people about why and talk about it. And I think that transparency and that level of accountability will then start to get us some more attention from other outside agencies, other departments in the state of California, as a for instance. And I think when they see us trying to clean up our act, I can't make any promises, but I think that'll get us some more positive attention than if we just keep pushing down the path that we're on.
One question. Can you tell us what you were most surprised by during the snowstorm, how the local officials responded or didn't respond to the needs of the people who were snowed in?
I think one of the things I was most surprised by, okay, repeating the question, sorry, if I keep doing this, I will get better, I promise. So the question is, what was one of the things I was most surprised by during the snowstorms in terms of residents being stuck in their houses? I think one of the things that surprised me was just the lack of coordination between the various county agencies. And I talked a little bit before about, I think the county isn't necessarily coordinated with the state, but through meeting with a bunch of people high up in the county at this point, we've realized even in terms of the county's internal structure, they weren't that coordinated. If you search on social media, you'll find Sheriff Dykes, the head of the Sheriff's Department. He has even referenced the fact that the Office of Emergency Services wasn't working properly, should be put under the purview of the Sheriff's Department like it was before. So even people within the county are talking to you, the voting public, about some issues they've had internally. So I think communication was a big struggle. I mean, we saw that certainly as residents. The county wasn't communicating effectively with us. And now talking to a bunch of people in the county, I think even internally the communications just weren't what they should be.
Another question, how do you plan to bring the chambers together and bring more unity to the mountain?
That's it. Okay, so the question is, how do I plan to bring the chambers together and bring more unity to the mountain? This is something that's near and dear to my heart as a mountain resident. And I think this is down to, this isn't just the county's responsibility. I also think this is the responsibility of the chambers as well. And I think if we saw a unified chamber across Lake Arrowhead, Crestline, Running Springs, I think as a bigger, more unified chamber, there'd also be more bargaining power on behalf of the mountain communities with the county. From a county perspective, one thing I'd really like to do is push forward this simplified development agenda, make small business, in terms of making small business easier up here on the mountain. And another aspect of, both this candidacy, talking to you now about stuff like this, what you see I do on social media. One thing I'm really focused on doing if elected to this seat is being really upfront with people about what's going on. And what that means for me is holding more regular community meetings, bringing everyone together and making sure we're on the same page. So I think this is both a shared responsibility between the county and the chambers to organize themselves, come together, and then I think if they can do that, then there's a lot more bargaining power on behalf of the mountain as it relates to the government.
I think it's probably worth reiterating the point about reestablishing MACs and having a more open dialogue with residents so that if they have suggestions of how things can improve.
That's also a very good point. So, in terms of reestablishing the MACs, it's not as, I haven't talked about it as much here just because we actually have 2 MACs up the mountain. This is a much bigger issue when you get down to the desert communities. But really finding ways to expand the MAC network, making them a bit more open, and having more regular dialogue between the communities and the MACs. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't as a citizen and as a resident, I don't feel particularly well connected to even our local MAC up here. And most of my county communication now happens direct with the county and not through the MAC. So I think we can find ways to promote them more, make them more open, and encourage some public participation.
Okay, I think that's all the questions.
Okay, so I think that's it for the Q&A. If you have any questions at all at any time, of course, reach us on social media. We're at Smith4SB on pretty much every social platform that you might follow. If you are at all invested in our mountain communities, if you want to see, it is, yeah. If you're at all invested in our mountain communities, if you want to see some change in this county and see some change at the Board of Supervisors level, please consider donating to the campaign. Everything we're doing is completely grassroots. We are being funded with generous individuals like you. So there's a QR code on the screen which will take you to the website, or visit the website smith4sb.com and click the donate button.
You have one more question.
One more question.
Forest Falls has quite a few poor services like electricity, internet, cell service, and trash. How would you advocate for getting better services up here?
As a mountain resident, I want better services for all of us. And I have found in the last few years living up here, I don't know if you guys agree with me, I've found our cell service has gotten worse. We live up an access road. The county doesn't pick up trash. We have to take everything to the dump. And I think one thing, this is where I think we need a representative on the Board of Supervisors who lives in an unincorporated part of the county, who knows some of these challenges and knows what it's like. Because let's be honest, if you live in a city down the mountain and your trash gets picked up every day and your cell phone works just fine, you don't even think about it. And look, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on how, let's say, some agency like Edison in the county has been coordinating on what neighborhoods to improve. There have been some areas where we've seen some improvements. Our power service in Sky Forest seems to have gotten more reliable in the last year or so. It's obviously not everywhere in the mountain, and I think we need to be coordinated between the government and all of these companies that maintain the infrastructure to make sure that we're making it better for as many people as we can. But this is something where I really think we need a representative who can really understand and empathize with what it's like to be a resident up here. And believe me, our driveway is 150 feet long, it's 45 degrees in terms of angle, and we are down there hauling our trash out in winter all the time. So I know what it's like.
And
That's also a very good point. So one thing, there's nothing necessarily wrong, not necessarily wrong, but there's nothing necessarily illegal about this. But a lot of the service providers that we find in the county, as of for instance Burtec, which is one of the biggest trash collection agencies here, there is a lot of intermingling between these companies and the Board of Supervisors. I've now attended a lot of Board of Supervisors meetings, and what I can tell you is I haven't attended a single one where one of the board members has had to excuse themselves from a vote because they've received a donation from a company involved in something they're voting on. Again, it's not necessarily illegal. They're doing the right thing by excusing themselves, but I think the fact that this happens so often in this county should be an alarm bell for us. Again, that's why I'm so focused on retaining independence here. I'm only taking donations from individuals and friends of the mountains, friends across District 3. So please, if any of this sounds good to you, again, I really encourage you to donate to the campaign. We have a real shot here as well. I think one thing that's really important to know is Dawn Rao won in 2020 with 55% of the vote, but she didn't have any of our mountain communities in the map at that point. So in 2020, there wasn't Crestline, there wasn't Lake Arrowhead, there wasn't Running Springs in the District 3 map, and there is now. So we have a real chance of getting this done, and I think we're doing a good job of getting the word out. We've got a whole social media paid advertising campaign that just got started this week. It's working really well, but we need the money to keep it running. So please consider supporting the campaign and donating whatever you can.
The last question, will you be doing these types of chats often throughout the campaign?
Yes, so good question. We're gonna do these 3 times a week between now and the primary. So we'll rotate the schedule. So the general idea is we'll do a desert one, a mountain one, and an urban one. So the campaign schedule between now and the primary is really Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, doing virtual events. If you have any interest in volunteering for the campaign, by the way, please drop us a DM or drop us an email. We're also about to kick off our full phone banking exercise as well. And then Friday through Monday will be in-person events in and around the district. If you haven't met me in person and you want to come meet me, this Saturday we're going to be at Evergreen on the corner of Cuffle and the 18, I think from 5 to 7, but the post will go up soon. So come out, meet me in person there. And the most important thing and the most helpful thing you can do in addition to financially supporting the campaign is just spreading the word. A huge part of this is going to come down to name recognition, and the more people that know my name, the better shot we're going to have as we get into the primary in March. So spread the word, support the campaign, and let people know about these sessions because we're going to do them regularly just to get as many people as possible. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and you know where to reach me. We're here if you have any questions at all. Drop us an email, text, DM on Instagram, Facebook, what have you. I'll let you get back to your Thursday evening and hope to see you around the mountain soon. Okay, night everyone.